They came with locks and chains, not to a bank, not to a prison, to a field in rural Oregon where a man had spent a decade doing something humans have done, without question since before recorded history. He caught rain. 3 reservoirs, 2 10-foot dams, and 1 20-foot dam, built on his own 172 acres, using his own money, over more than a decade of labor. The water inside those reservoirs never touched a river, never crossed a property line. It fell from the sky, onto his land, and he stored it. Nearly 13 million gallons, enough to protect his home and his livestock from the wildfires that had already scarred that part of Oregon more than once. The state of Oregon told him to drain every drop. He refused. So they prosecuted him. 9 misdemeanor charges, 30 days in a state prison cell, a $1,500 fine. And when he walked out of that jail, they went to his property with padlocks and chains and destroyed what he built, so he could never rebuild it. His name was Gary Harrington, and the law used to jail him was written in 1925. The same year a municipal water utility was handed legal ownership of every molecule of precipitation that fell in that Oregon watershed. Every snowflake, every raindrop, all of it owned by a water commission before it ever touched the ground. The question is not whether Gary Harrington was technically guilty. He was. The question is how we got to a place in America where catching rain on your own land can put you in prison, and what that legal history means for the 4 billion people who already face severe water scarcity every year, a number the United Nations says will reach 5 billion by 2050. Because the answer to that crisis already exists. It fell on your roof this morning. Right now, the world's aquifers are collapsing. More than half of the largest lakes on Earth have lost water since Source Science Journal, Global Lake Study 2023. The Colorado River, the legal source of drinking water for 40 million Americans, is governed by a compact written in 1922 based on river flow measurements that no longer reflect reality. The river has shrunk. The law has not changed. In January 2026, the United Nations used a word it had never used before to describe the global freshwater situation. Not crisis, not stress. They called it water bankruptcy. Source UN World Water Development Report 2026. The savings accounts are empty. The withdrawal rate has permanently exceeded the deposit rate. By the end of this video, you will know the complete 6,000-year history of the technology that was our answer to this problem, and why it was quietly made illegal across most of the American West. You will know the exact legal status of rainwater collection in all 50 states as of 2025. You will know how to build a functional system on your own property for between $250 step by step using materials available at any hardware store. And you will understand why the people who built these systems in the ancient world never needed a municipal water authority, a grid connection, or permission from anyone. The knowledge was never lost, it was simply left behind. We think of water infrastructure as something modern, something engineered, something that requires pipes and treatment plants and utility bills. That assumption is less than 2 centuries old. The practice it replaced is 6,000 years old, and it worked better. Go back to the Negev Desert in 2000 BC. This is some of the driest land on Earth. Annual rainfall that modern engineers would consider completely inadequate to support settled civilization. Yet archaeologists excavating sites across the Negev have found the ruins of entire cities. Not nomadic camps, cities. Permanent multi-generational settlements of thousands of people with granaries, marketplaces, and sophisticated domestic architecture. Source: Archaeological Survey of Israel, Negev Highland Survey, ongoing. They survived because they understood the geometry of rain. Every hillside in the Negev was engineered. Rockline channels called talmudim ran in precise diagonal cuts across the slopes, slowing runoff and directing it toward limestone cisterns carved deep into the valley floors. A single major cistern could hold hundreds of thousands of gallons. The runoff catchment area for one such system sometimes covered an entire hillside, the stone surface of the Negev itself acting as the roof. In the rare rain events that hit the desert, nothing was wasted. Every drop was caught, directed, stored, and rationed. For generations. Without pumps, without pipes, without utility companies. Then move 12,000 kilometers west, the Yucatan Peninsula, 250 BC to 900 AD. The Maya were building one of the most sophisticated civilizations in human history, in a landscape with a geological problem that should have stopped them entirely. The Yucatan sits on a vast shelf of porous limestone. Rain that falls there simply vanishes, absorbed into the rock within minutes, funneling into underground cave systems called cenotes that are inaccessible from the surface without rope and effort. There are virtually no surface rivers in the northern Yucatan, no lakes, no streams, and yet Uxmal, one of the great Maya cities, supported an estimated population of 25,000 people. Beneath the plazas and temples, archaeologists from UAM, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, have mapped a network of bottle-shaped underground chambers called choltuns, hand-carved into the limestone bedrock beneath the plazas themselves. Source: UAM Archaeological Institute, Yucatan Water System Study, 2019. The flared bases of these chambers held water in the limestone. The narrow necks reduced evaporation. The plazas above were deliberately sloped, not for aesthetics but as catchment surfaces, directing every rain event down through drains carved into the plaza floor and into the choltuns below. The city was, in its entire physical design, a machine for catching rain. Cross the Atlantic to Pompeii, frozen in time under volcanic ash in 79 AD. When archaeologists began excavating in the 18th century, they expected to find evidence of the famous Roman aqueducts that had supplied the region. What they found in the private homes was something different. Terracotta pipes running from every rooftop, through the walls of the atrium, into a stone-lined impluvium, a shallow pool built directly into the floor of the main room, and from there into an underground cisterna beneath the house. Source: University of Naples Federico II, Pompeii Domestic Water System Study, 2011. The aqueduct was public infrastructure, yes, but every Roman household of any means had its own independent water system, harvesting its own roof, independent of the public supply. The Romans understood something we have forgotten, that infrastructure dependency is vulnerability. The aqueduct could be cut, the cistern could not. Go east to Gujarat and Rajasthan in India, and you find perhaps the most sophisticated ancient rainwater system ever built at scale. The Kund, a circular, step-sided underground cistern carved from rock, was standard household infrastructure across the Thar Desert by at least 3000 BC. Source: Central Arid Zone Research Institute, Jodhpur, Historical Water Harvesting Survey. A traditional kund was not a small rain barrel. A single household kund typically held 50,000 to 100,000 gallons. The catchment was a carefully smoothed area of compacted earth or stone surrounding the opening, sometimes the size of a tennis court, sloped precisely to funnel every rain event inward. The opening was covered to prevent evaporation and contamination. A single kund could supply a family through an 8-month dry season with water of adequate quality for drinking. Here is the detail that makes architectural historians stop. The earliest kunds so far identified in Gujarat have been radiocarbon dated to the late Harappan period, approximately 2500 BC. Source: Archaeological Survey of India, Dholavira excavation reports, that places systematic household rainwater harvesting in South Asia at roughly the same time as the construction of Stonehenge, nearly 1,000 years before the first Greek city-states, and more than 2,000 years before Rome built its first major aqueduct. And in the Levant, ancient Palestine, Jordan and Syria, archaeologists have found waterproof limeplaster cisterns built directly into the floors of permanent Bronze Age homes dating to 4000 BC. Source: Biblical Archaeology Review, Cistern Development in the Southern Levant, 2017. The limeplaster was a technological breakthrough. It was hydraulic, it hardened underwater rather than dissolving, which meant for the first time, underground cisterns could be made genuinely watertight. Settlement patterns across the southern Levant changed almost immediately after this innovation. Communities that had previously clustered along springs and streams began appearing in hill country, on ridgelines, in locations with no natural water source at all, because they no longer needed one. This was not primitive engineering, it was not a desperate improvisation, it was a considered, sophisticated, continuously refined technology that was the primary water supply for most of human civilization for most of recorded history. It had no moving parts. It required no energy input beyond the labor to build it. It could not be shut off by a central authority. And it worked without interruption, across 6 continents and 6,000 years, until the 20th century, when it was quietly replaced, in much of the developed world, by centralized grid infrastructure. And in the American West, for reasons that have nothing to do with engineering, it was made illegal. The story of how catching rain became a crime in America does not begin with malice. It begins with gold. The year is 1849. The Sierra Nevada foothills are overrun with miners. The problem with gold mining at scale is not finding the gold. It is moving the water. Hydraulic mining, the dominant technique of the California gold rush, requires enormous volumes of water delivered under pressure to hillsides that may be miles from the nearest natural source. The miners who needed water most were often not the miners closest to a river, so a legal system emerged from necessity, ratified by California courts, and then adopted across the entire American West. The rule was simple: whoever physically diverted a water source first had the superior right to continue diverting it. First in time, first in right. Not the landowner closest to the water, not the person with the greatest need. The first person to physically take it and put it to use. This became the doctrine of prior appropriation, and it is still the foundational water law across 17 Western states. Source: Western States Water Council, Prior Appropriation Doctrine Overview, 2022. It was designed for rivers, for streams, for the rough logic of industrial extraction. It was never designed for rain, but as cities grew and municipal water utilities formed, their lawyers saw the doctrine's potential. To fund aqueducts and pipelines, utilities needed to issue bonds. To issue bonds, they needed to guarantee investors a return.
To guarantee a return, they needed to guarantee the water supply. And so, beginning in the late 19th century, and accelerating through the early 20th, municipal water commissions across the West began filing prior appropriation claims, not just on rivers and streams, but on entire watersheds, every tributary, every seep, and eventually every drop of precipitation that fell within a defined drainage basin, on the legal theory that it was destined to flow toward the source they had already claimed. In Colorado, the doctrine was applied so comprehensively that for most of the 20th century, it was literally illegal to catch rainwater in a barrel. Not restricted, illegal. The legal reasoning was internally consistent, even if the outcome sounds absurd. Every raindrop that fell in Colorado was already spoken for by a downstream rights holder. If your roof intercepted it before it reached the creek, you were stealing water that legally belonged to someone else, even if that someone else was a water utility 50 miles away. Source: Colorado Water Conservation Board, Prior Appropriation History 2020.
Colorado finally legalized small-scale rainwater collection in 2016. The cap they set, 110 gallons. 2 rain barrels. That is the extent to which a property owner in Colorado can legally intercept precipitation falling on their own roof without violating state water law. That number tells you exactly how deep prior appropriation reached into the sky above your house. In Oregon's Big Butte Creek watershed, the mechanism was even more direct. In 1925, the Oregon State Legislature passed a specific statute granting the Medford Irrigation District and the Medford Water Commission exclusive rights to all unappropriated water in the Big Butte watershed, including precipitation. The timing was not coincidental. That same year, the Medford Water Commission was selling bonds to finance a 31-mile pipeline from a mountain spring to the city. Source: Oregon Water Resources Department. Medford Water Commission Historical Records. The statute was written to protect that investment, to guarantee that no property owner in the watershed could intercept water that was legally, in the eyes of Oregon law, already flowing toward a municipal system. Nearly a century later, that same statute sent Gary Harrington to a prison cell. He was not a political actor. He was not making a legal test case. He was a man who looked at the wildfires burning around his property and built reservoirs to protect it. His legal team argued traditional water rights, ranchers' rights, common sense. The state argued the statute, and the statute was unambiguous. The Medford Water Commission owned the rain. He served his 30 days. His dams were breached and padlocked. His 13 million gallons drained back into the watershed, back to the utility that owned it. In the summer of 2014, a woman named Nita Zawahiri moved from Portland to a 5-acre property outside Bend, Oregon. She had spent 20 years working in urban water infrastructure. She understood municipal systems from the inside. She understood their maintenance costs, their vulnerability to drought conditions, and the quiet pressure her employer faced every dry season when reservoir levels fell and demand didn't. Source: High Desert Journal, The Water Collectors, 2021. She had followed it. Zawahiri's property sat in Deschutes County, outside the Big Butte watershed, outside the specific statute that had jailed Harrington. Oregon's general rainwater laws allowed modest collection. She built carefully, a 2,200 square foot metal roof on her main structure, 4 IBC totes connected in a gravity-fed chain, holding 1,100 gallons combined. With a first flush diverter she built herself from PVC pipe for under $30, a sediment filter, and a UV sterilizer running off a small photovoltaic panel. Her first full year, she captured 41,000 gallons from roof collection alone. She supplemented her municipal connection for drinking water. She was not willing to navigate Oregon's complex potable water regulations without legal support, but her outdoor irrigation, her vegetable garden, her livestock water, and her laundry all ran from the roof system for 9 months of the year. Her combined water bill dropped by 63%. But the detail she talks about most is not the money. "I've watched the Deschutes River shrink every summer for 20 years, she told a journalist from High Desert Journal in 2021. "Every drop I catch off my roof is one less drop someone downstream has to fight over." Paraphrased from High Desert Journal, 2021. She understood what the ancient engineers understood, that capturing rain where it falls reduces demand on the shared system. It does not take water away from anyone. It interrupts the cycle of extraction that has been draining the American West for a century. Zawahiri now consults with rural Oregon landowners on legal rainwater systems, working carefully within state regulations, helping people understand where the lines are and how to build effective systems without crossing them. She has helped more than 200 families install systems since 2016. She talks about Gary Harrington the way people talk about a cautionary myth, the man who built too much in the wrong watershed, under the wrong century-old statute, but whose instinct, that a person on their land should be able to catch what falls on it, was right about something that human civilization figured out 6,000 years ago. He understood the principle, she has said. He just didn't know the map. Nita Zawahiri's 63% water bill reduction is a compelling individual story, but what does it mean at scale? The numbers here are not speculative. They come from peer-reviewed hydrological research, UN agency reports, and federal government data, and they are more serious than most people realize. More than half of the world's largest lakes have measurably lost water since 1990, according to a 2023 study published in Science, the most comprehensive global survey of lake storage ever conducted, covering 1.42 million lakes using satellite data from 1992 to Science 2023. The combined water loss from the world's lakes in that period is equivalent to the entire annual water consumption of the United States. Every person, every farm, every factory, for 17 consecutive years. Underground is worse. A 2023 global analysis of groundwater aquifer trends published in Nature found that 71% of the world's monitored aquifers showed declining water tables, and that the rate of decline had accelerated significantly since 2000. Nature 2023, the Ogallala Aquifer, which irrigates a third of all U.S. groundwater irrigated cropland, is being drawn down at 8 times its natural recharge rate. At current extraction rates, significant portions of the southern Ogallala are projected to become economically unusable within 25 years. Source: Kansas Geological Survey, Ogallala Aquifer Depletion Study, 2022. The colonial-era city was built on a drained lakebed, and the aquifer beneath it has been drawn down so severely that parts of the city are subsiding at a rate of 20 inches per year. A process called subsidence that permanently destroys the aquifer's storage capacity as the substrate compacts. Source: Institute of Geophysics, Mexico City Subsidence Data, 2023. Parts of historic downtown Mexico City have sunk more than 40 feet since The Colorado River Compact, the 1922 legal agreement governing water for 40 million people across 7 states, was written based on flow measurements taken during an unusually wet decade. The river's actual long-term average flow is now understood to be roughly 15% lower than the compact assumed. The compact has never been renegotiated. The river it describes no longer exists. Source: Bureau of Reclamation Colorado River Basin Water Supply and Demand Study, 2024. 4 billion people, more than half the world's population, currently face severe water scarcity for at least 1 month per year. Source: McConan and Hoekstra, Science Advances 2016, Updated Projections 2023. The UN's January 2026 Declaration of Global Water Bankruptcy was the culmination of a trend that has been building for 40 years. It is not a forecast, it is an accounting, and the sky is still delivering. An average American roof, 2,000 square feet, produces 1,250 gallons of harvestable water from a single inch of rain. Source: US EPA, Green Infrastructure and Rainwater Harvesting Guide, 2023. The average American home receives between 25 and 50 inches of rainfall per year. Do the arithmetic. A single roof, properly harvested, can yield between 31,000 and 62,000 gallons annually, enough to irrigate a substantial kitchen garden through a full dry season, enough to flush every toilet in the home, enough with proper filtration to drink. Every drop that is not captured flows into the storm drain. It carries fertilizer runoff, motor oil, road chemicals, and microplastics into waterways. It contributes to downstream flooding. It recharges nothing. It benefits no one. The ancient engineers of the Negev, the Maya, the Romans, and the Harappan civilization would have considered this arrangement the deliberate waste of falling water, a form of civilizational insanity. The people who never stop doing this are not hard to find. In Rajasthan, farmers still build khans the way their great-grandparents did. In rural Kenya, corrugated metal rooftops funnel rain into underground tanks that supply families through 6-month dry seasons. In rural Australia, 30,000-gallon polyethylene tanks are so common that entire communities have no municipal water connection at all. The technology has not changed in 6,000 years because the physics have not changed. Here is how you build it. Start where you are. Scale from there. The first system you build does not require a contractor, a permit in most states, or more than an afternoon of work. A single 55-gallon food-grade barrel, the kind used in food processing and available from agricultural suppliers, used barrel dealers, or online for $20 to $40 connected to a downspout with a pre-made diverter fitting handles. Everything. Total material cost, $80 to $160 to $160. The diverter fitting is the only proprietary part. It installs in 5 minutes. You cut a section of your existing downspout, snap the diverter in place, and it routes water into your barrel, while automatically bypassing to the original drain path when the barrel is full. No overflow flooding, no basement risk. A 55-gallon barrel connected to a 500-square-foot section of roof, roughly one downspout's catchment area, can fill completely from less than 0.2 of an inch of rain. In a climate with regular rainfall, it will refill after every significant storm. For a garden, 55 gallons is 2 weeks of hand-watering a 200-square-foot plot without touching a hose bib. That is the floor. The ceiling is much higher. The formula that turns a rain barrel into a genuine water utility has 4 parts. Once assembled, it operates entirely on gravity and precipitation. No electricity required except for filtration upgrades, which are optional. Component 1, the catchment surface. You already own it, your roof. You need 2 things:
Clean gutters, debris-free and sloped correctly toward downspouts, and functional downspouts directing water toward your storage location. A metal roof, steel or aluminum produces the cleanest possible rainwater with minimal filtering required. Asphalt shingles work well with standard filtration. Cedar shake shingles leach tannins and are not recommended for potable grade systems without advanced treatment. Pro tip: the first step most guides skip is gutter cleaning and inspection. A clogged or sagging gutter negates everything downstream. Spend an hour cleaning gutters before you spend $1 on equipment. The catchment surface costs you nothing to build, only to maintain. Component 2, the first flush diverter. This is the component that earns your system credibility, and the one most beginner guides skip entirely. The first water off any roof in a rainstorm is the dirtiest. Bird droppings, pollen, atmospheric particulates, chemical residue baked onto the shingles since the last rain, it all comes off in the first few gallons. If you route that first flush directly into your storage tank, you are contaminating a large volume of cleaner water with a small volume of concentrated debris. A first flush diverter is a vertical standpipe, simply a capped piece of PVC pipe, installed in series between your downspout and your storage tank. The calculation is straightforward: 1 gallon of standpipe volume per 100 square feet of roof area. For a 1,000 square foot catchment, a 10-gallon standpipe, 4-inch PVC, roughly 5 feet tall, is correct sizing. Water enters the top of the standpipe first, filling it from the bottom. A small bleed hole, or a commercial ball float valve, slowly drains the accumulated first flush water between storm events over the course of 24 to 48 hours. Everything that flows after the standpipe is full routes into your storage. Build it yourself for $15 to $30 in PVC parts. Buy a pre-made commercial version for $40 to $80. Either way, included. Systems without first flush diverters accumulate contamination over time in ways that are difficult to reverse. Component 3, storage for garden irrigation and outdoor use. Intermediate bulk containers called IBC totes are the most cost-effective storage option currently available. These are the 275-gallon food-grade pallet-mounted plastic tanks used across the food and beverage industry for bulk liquid transport. Used units in clean condition sell from agricultural suppliers, food processors, and online marketplaces for $80 to $150 each. Connect 2 IBC totes at their lower drain ports using a standard 1.5-inch bulkhead fitting and a short section of PVC pipe. 550 gallons of linked storage for approximately $200 in tank cost and under $15 in fittings. The water level equalizes between linked tanks automatically through gravity. Add a screened inlet fitting to your first tank's top opening. Mosquitoes require only a 1/4 inch of standing water to breed, and an unscreened tank becomes a vector problem within a single season. This is a $10 to $20 part and non-negotiable. Add an overflow pipe at the maximum fill level of your last tank directed toward a rain garden, swale, or permeable surface at least 6 feet from your foundation. Overflow water infiltrating directly against a foundation is a basement problem. Pro tip: position your storage tanks at the highest practical elevation on your property. Even a 2-foot elevation gain creates meaningful gravity pressure for drip irrigation without a pump. For gravity-fed drip systems, a minimum of 2 feet of head pressure is the threshold where most systems work reliably without a pump. 3 to 4 feet is comfortable. A third IBC tote brings total storage to 825 gallons, enough to carry most properties through a 3-week dry stretch with no rainfall at all. For context, a 3-week gap between significant rain events is common across most of the United States from June through August. Component 4, filtration. Match your filtration level to your intended use. For outdoor irrigation and garden watering, the entry system, the screen on your tank inlet, is sufficient. Plants do not require treated water. For laundry and toilet flushing, add a 5-micron sediment filter, $30 to $50, and a 0.5-micron carbon block filter, $40 to $80 in series between your tank outlet and any indoor connection. Install a small 12-volt or a 110-volt pump, $60 to $120, to supply the necessary pressure. Total addition for non-potable indoor use, $130 to $250. For drinking water, the standard addition used across the developing world and by rural homesteaders globally is a UV sterilization unit installed after your filtration sequence. UV destroys bacterial and viral contamination without chemicals, requires no filter replacement, and runs on minimal electricity. Most residential UV units draw less than 40 watts. Units from reputable manufacturers including Viqua, Watts Premier, and Trojan UV run a $100 to $250. Pro tip on the drinking water step that most guides omit: UV sterilization is only effective in water with turbidity below 1 NTU, nephelometric turbidity unit. Sediment-loaded water blocks UV penetration. Your sediment and carbon filtration sequence before the UV unit is not
optional. It is what makes the UV work. Test your filtered water's turbidity before adding UV. A basic turbidity meter costs $15 to $25. If turbidity is consistently above 1 NTU, add a pre-filter cartridge. Total system costs: a functional 550-gallon irrigation and outdoor system, 2 IBC totes, first flush diverter, screened inlets, overflow pipe runs $250, A system capable of supplementing all outdoor uses plus non-potable indoor functions. $500 to $800. A fully potable capable system with UV treatment and filtration. $700 to $1,100. All figures represent DIY installation with no contractor. Every dollar of that cost pays for itself in the first season for most households. Before you buy a single fitting, know where you stand. In 46 of the 50 states, there is no restriction on rooftop rainwater collection from residential property. No permit, no registration, no volume limit. The federal government has no regulation against residential rainwater harvesting. In the majority of the country, the water that falls on your roof is yours. The exceptions are narrow but important. Colorado is the most restrictive state remaining. As of 2016, Colorado allows up to 110 gallons, 255-gallon barrels of rooftop rainwater collection per residential property for outdoor use only. No permit required within that limit. Above 110 gallons requires a permit and is generally unavailable for residential properties. If you live in Colorado, start with 2 barrels and verify with the Colorado Water Conservation Board before expanding. Utah allows up to 2,500 gallons with free registration through the Utah Division of Water Rights. Above 2,500 gallons requires a water right permit. The registration process is simple and online. Source: Utah Code Palaroc 7331.5. Oregon has no statewide restriction on rooftop rainwater collection from rooftops for residential use, but watershed-specific statutes like the one that jailed Gary Harrington exist in certain basins. If you live in the Rogue River Basin or Big Butte watershed, verify your specific watershed status with the Oregon Water Resources Department before installing anything beyond barrel-scale systems. The department's website maintains watershed-specific restriction data. Source: Oregon Revised Statutes POWRX 37.545. Texas not only permits rainwater harvesting, it actively incentivizes it. Rainwater collection equipment is exempt from state sales tax, and in many counties from property tax assessment. Many Texas municipalities, including Austin, offer rebates of up to $5,000 for cistern installation. Source: Texas Water Development Board, Rainwater Harvesting Program 2024. Arizona provides similar incentives through the Arizona Department of Water Resources and permits unlimited collection from residential rooftops. The department has published a detailed residential rainwater harvesting manual, available free at their website. Source: Arizona Department of Water Resources, Residential Rainwater Harvesting Manual, 2022. California's Rainwater Capture Act of 2012, Senate Bill 15072, allows rooftop rainwater collection for outdoor non-potable use, irrigation, landscaping, without any permit for residential properties. Source: California Water Code PARC 10573. Potable use requires a permit through your county health department and must meet Title 22 water quality standards. For drinking water specifically, no state explicitly prohibits it from properly filtered and treated rainwater, but the regulatory landscape varies significantly. Most states treat residential rainwater as outside the jurisdiction of their potable water regulations entirely, which means no protection, but also no prohibition. If you choose to use harvested rainwater for drinking, the responsibility for treatment adequacy is yours. Verify with your state's Department of Environmental Quality or Water Resources agency before use. There is a country that has already solved this problem at national scale. It is not a wealthy country, it is not a high-technology country, and almost no one in the American water policy conversation is paying attention to it. Bermuda is a 21-square-mile island in the Atlantic with no rivers, no aquifer of any consequence, and no freshwater lakes. Its entire population of roughly 64,000 people has been supplied by rainwater harvesting since British colonial settlement in the 1600s. Not supplemented by rainwater harvesting, supplied by it. Bermudian Building Code requires every residential and commercial structure to maintain a roof catchment system and cistern as a condition of occupancy. The characteristic white-stepped roofs of Bermudian architecture are not decorative, they are engineered. Each step increases the surface area available for collection and directs water toward gutters in a specific sequence designed to maximize yield in brief, intense Caribbean rain events. Cisterns are typically built beneath the structure itself, into the limestone bedrock, with capacity requirements scaled to roof area. Source: Bermuda Ministry of Public Works, Rainwater Harvesting Code. The average Bermudian household captures 80 to 90% of its annual water needs from its own roof. Municipal supply exists as a backup, primarily desalinated seawater, but it is the backup system, not the primary one. Per capita water costs in Bermuda are among the lowest in the developed world, despite the island importing virtually all goods and having no indigenous freshwater resource. The technology that supplies an entire British overseas territory is the same technology Gary Harrington used on his Oregon property. The difference is not the engineering. The difference is that Bermuda never had a 19th century gold rush to create a doctrine of prior appropriation. Nobody claimed the rain before it landed. There is a particular kind of forgetting that happens slowly, over generations, as the systems that were once personal become centralized and managed by institutions. We hand over the function, and eventually we forget we were ever capable of performing it ourselves. Water is the oldest example of this.
Our great-grandparents, in most of the world, maintained their own water supply as a basic household function, no different from maintaining a garden, a root cellar, or a woodpile. The idea that water was something you paid a monthly fee for, delivered through pipes controlled by a distant authority, would have seemed strange to almost every person who lived before the 20th century. We gained a great deal from centralized water infrastructure. Safe, treated water at scale prevented disease on a civilizational level. We should not pretend otherwise, but we also lost something. We lost the knowledge, we lost the instinct, and we lost the resilience. Gary Harrington understood that instinct, imperfectly, illegally in his specific jurisdiction, and stubbornly. He was defending a principle that was thousands of years old before the state of Oregon existed, before prior appropriation was written, before the Medford Water Commission sold its first bond. The principle that a person on their own land, in their own reign, is not a thief for catching what falls from the sky. The UN has declared water bankruptcy. The aquifers are declining. The rivers are overallocated. The legal frameworks governing water in the American West were written for a hydrology that no longer exists. And the sky is still delivering. Every civilization that survived drought survived because someone at some point decided to stop waiting for the water to come to them. The farmers of Rajasthan never stopped building kunds. The families of rural Bermuda never dismantled their cisterns. The engineers of Dolavira and Uxmal and Pompeii built systems that outlasted empires. The drought is not coming for all of us. For many communities, the UN says it has already arrived. The knowledge of what to do about it was never lost. It is waiting, right now, on your rooftop. If what you watch today opens something for you, not just about water, but about what we have quietly handed over and forgotten how to do ourselves, subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault and ring the bell. This channel exists to recover exactly these kinds of knowledges, not survival prepping, not paranoia, the deep, proven, practical wisdom of people who lived close to the systems that kept them alive and built things that still work thousands of years later. Every like you give this video tells the algorithm that this kind of content deserves to exist. Every share keeps the information alive in someone else's conversation. The next vault opens soon, and it covers a topic that will change how you think about the ground beneath your feet. Subscribe, share, and go check your gutters.